So, good morning, everybody. My name is Shawn, and welcome to the Integrate Your Atlassian Cloud Pipeline with Octopus Deploy webinar. Today, our presenter is Mark Harrison. How's it going, Mark?
Shawn, I'm good, thank you. I've been enjoying some post-Easter warmer weather today here in the UK. So it's been glorious sunshine on the south coast, so I cannot complain. How about yourself?
It is raining in the Pacific Northwest. I know that's a big shock to everybody, but yeah, we've actually had a couple of weeks of really, really nice weather where we couldn't go anywhere, but now it's raining, so it is what it is. All right, before we get started, I have a couple of housekeeping things that we'd like to take care of. There is no need to record this webinar. We are recording it for you. This recording will be available within 24 to 48 hours. We'll be emailing you a link to that recording along with any other resources that Mark is going to be talking about today. We're also on Slack. So if you go to octopus.com/Slack, there's a webinar channel where you can feel free to ask any questions. And there's also the Zoom Q&A. You can ask questions there. Lastly, we'll be taking questions at the end to put Mark in the hot seat. With that, I'll hand it over to Mark.
Thanks for that introduction, Shawn. And thank you to everyone for joining today's webinar on integrating Atlassian Cloud with Octopus Deploy. So first off, let's take a look at our agenda. So I'm going to start off today talking a little bit about what products I mean when we say Atlassian Cloud. Next, I'll look at some of the ways you can integrate your Atlassian Cloud Pipeline with Octopus Deploy. I'll also be taking you through a new feature we've got coming soon. It's our integrated change management feature with JIRA Service Desk. From there, we'll get into the part that everyone's probably here for, and that's the integration between Atlassian and Octopus in action. And I'll be demonstrating an end-to-end CI/CD pipeline that's going to be using Bitbucket pipelines, and then integrating with Octopus, where we'll automatically generate release notes from your JIRA issues, and also see your deployments in your JIRA issues directly. And then lastly, as Shawn mentioned, we'll have some time left over to put me in the hot seat for any questions you've got. So, what are the products I'm going to cover in today's webinar? Well, the first one is Bitbucket. Bitbucket is Atlassian's answer to source code management, but it's got a lot more to offer than just source code. It gives teams one place to plan projects, collaborate on code, test, and deploy. And it comes in 3 different hosting options: cloud, which we'll see a little bit later, on-premise, or for enterprises looking for things such as high availability, there's a data center option too. Next up, we've got Bitbucket Pipelines. And this is Atlassian's lightweight continuous integration server. I should mention at this point, that's only available with Bitbucket Cloud, and it uses pre-configured Docker containers to run your build steps. And this allows you to automatically build, test, and deploy your code. Now, whether or not you love it or hate it, the definition of those pipelines is stored as YAML files. But this does allow you to version control your build pipeline, and it also has support for different pipelines per branch too. Now, to complement Bitbucket pipelines, Atlassian introduced a concept called pipes. Now, pipes build on the core principles of pipelines, and that's containers. And a pipe makes use of a script that lives inside of a Docker container, and it will typically have the commands you'd write in your pipeline YAML file before pipes were introduced. They're essentially code snippets, if you like, which perform an action. They allow you to repeat that same action in multiple steps of your pipeline, which can lead to simpler pipeline configuration, as you can then reuse those pipes across multiple steps and indeed multiple repositories. And another key feature of a pipe versus directly scripting in your pipeline is you get the ability to include dependencies that your main pipeline doesn't actually require. And lastly, but by no means least, JIRA, which is probably one of, if not the most well-known Atlassian products. And that provides a central place for both issue tracking and project tracking. It's suited really well for agile development teams. Now, I've used JIRA in a couple of companies in the past myself, and each time I've used it in a slightly different way. And Atlassian recognize this, and they support this through customized workflows. And that allows you to ship software the way your team is set up. And they also have a marketplace with lots of other integrations to further enhance your experience. They've got both cloud and server self-hosted options as well. So, what ways are there to integrate your Atlassian Cloud products with Octopus today? Well, there's going to be 4 main areas that I'm going to talk about. Now, the first one is the Octopus plugin for JIRA Cloud. This enables teams to see the status of their releases and deployments directly from their JIRA issues, with deep links back to Octopus for further details. You can see when features are updated and deployed to production, and you can also track important bug fixes from creation all the way through to deployment. I should mention that this isn't available for JIRA Server, which is on-premise, only cloud, and this is due to the required APIs not being available for JIRA Server. Next up, we've got Octopus JIRA Issue Tracking. Now with this feature, you can see JIRA issues in your releases and deployments within Octopus. Now, when that's configured, Octopus contacts JIRA to request issue information. And this includes things like links and descriptions of your JIRA issues. Now, you can use this information to add details of your JIRA issues in both release and deployment notes. And you can then share those release notes via email or a Slack notification that's sent through via Octopus. And we'll see an example of that in our demo later on. We also have the Octopus CLI, and this is our command line tool that builds on top of the Octopus REST API. Now, with the CLI, you can integrate with Octopus in many ways. For example, package your applications, push your packages to Octopus, manage your releases, deployments, environments, and much more. And if you are using Bitbucket pipelines, you can make use of the Octopus Octo Docker image, and that's essentially a wrapper for the CLI. And we'll see that being used in the sample pipeline later on. And lastly, for anything else not covered above, there's the REST API. Octopus Deploy is built API first. Now, anything you can do in the web portal, you can do via the API. So you can integrate with Octopus using the API in whichever language or tools you prefer. Now, I couldn't talk about integrations between Atlassian Cloud and Octopus without also mentioning a new feature we have coming soon. Now, coming in version 2020.2, we will have a new service desk step under an Atlassian category. And this will allow you to automatically create a change request in JIRA Service Desk during your deployments. So it'll be a thing of the past where you've been worrying about deployments to production, where they're occurring without the right approvals. Now, whilst I will be showing the built-in step towards the end of the demo, as that feature isn't quite finished yet, I won't be showing it in action. However, if you do want to find out more, I'd highly recommend checking out octopus.com/roadmap. And there's a section there, I think it's at the bottom, to subscribe for updates, and you'll be notified when that's released. So now let's briefly talk about the sample application I'm going to use in the demo for some of these integrations. Now, it's called PetClinic. PetClinic is a Spring Boot Java web application. It's been around for quite a while, and it allows you to manage a fictitious vet clinic. Now, the app itself is hosted on a Wildfly application server, as you can see here, and it uses a MySQL backend for its database, and we're also utilizing Redgate's Flyway tool to perform database migrations today. And what I plan to do is explore the build pipeline a little bit, kick off a build, and then talk through some of the Octopus features as the release is being deployed through the environment. And then at the end, I'll talk about that new integration with JIRA Service Desk. So firstly, let's go and take a look at where the source code lives. And that's Bitbucket. Okay, so as you can see the web browser here, it's got the standard types of things you're likely familiar with, particularly if you've used things like GitHub. Now, I'm not going to focus too much into the detail in the source code itself, but what I would like to do is focus on one main file, the Bitbucket pipelines YAML file. Now, this file defines your pipeline build configuration. Now, the pipeline is made up of a list of steps, and you can define both multiple steps and indeed multiple pipelines in the one configuration file. Now, this can include things like branches, tags, and pull requests. So for the pipeline today, I've just got a single pipeline for the master branch, as you can see here. So let's talk about the steps. So my first step here is generate package version. So this is going to be a unique version number that I'll use for my application packages. The second step is to build the PetClinic web application. And it'll also package it for me into a WAR archive file. And we're using the artifacts declaration here so that we can take that WAR archive file and pass it on to subsequent steps. Now, this next step is creating a MySQL Flyway database migrations package. Now, this step is a little bit different to the first two steps you've seen. So rather than just issuing shell commands like Maven there, this makes use of a Bitbucket pipe. And you can see that it's doing that by this pipe declaration here. Now, this is an experimental pipe that we've created here at Octopus called pack. Now, the pack pipe runs in a Docker container, and it will take a source folder and creates either a NuGet or a zip file, and then outputs that package to the specified folder. Now, in this case, we're going to be using this to package up the Flyway database migrations into a zip file. And you can see here that you've got this variables declaration. And this allows you to pass in variables to the pipe. Now, with these variable declarations and some documentation behind it, the pipes really help to start simplify your pipeline configuration, as you can reuse this in multiple steps. Just like before, we're using the artifacts, and this is going to provide us the ability to take the zip file and pass it on to multiple steps. Okey-dokes. And a fun fact for you, because the pipe itself is just a Docker image, this allows you to specify a base image for it in its Docker file. And the pack pipe actually utilizes the Octo Docker image itself, and that's a wrapper for the Octopus CLI. And in the future, we're looking to create a pipe which covers all of the more commonly used commands in the Octopus CLI. So watch this space. Now, in the next 4 steps, you'll continue to see that theme of using the Octo Docker image being used to integrate your Bitbucket pipeline with Octopus. So the next step here is push packages to Octopus. Now that will push the packages to the Octopus built-in repository, and it does 2 pushes here using that push command. It does it one for the PetClinic MySQL database package and one for the web application. After that, it's the build information. This will create the relevant build information in Octopus using the build information command. This will include things like the commit that triggered the build of the pipeline and links to both the build and any commits. Following that, we've got the create release step. That does what it says on the tin, takes the create release command and then creates a release for us in Octopus. And finally, the last step deploys the latest release to development using the deploy release command that you can see here. And that's just going to take the latest version. So now we've seen the pipeline, let's see it in action. So I'm just going to edit the pipeline file here. And I'm just going to make a white space change just to simulate a change. We'll just commit. Now I'm going to remove the automatically generated message and I'm going to put in one that I created earlier. So the message here has also got a link to a JIRA issue that I created, Pet 13, unlucky for some. And it's just going to trigger a sample build using Bitbucket pipelines as the message, and we'll do commit on that. Now, once I do that, that will automatically trigger a build of the pipeline. So I'll click on into pipelines here. And you can see it's already in progress. So you can see it's already started building our pipeline. Now, I've spent quite a bit of time in the Atlassian product recently, and actually really like this pipeline overview. It feels really clean to me with this kind of top-down approach to the build steps where it goes that one and then that one. Now, whilst we wait for this to complete, and it can take anywhere between 4 to 5 minutes, I'm going to switch over to Octopus and talk about the environments and the PetClinic deployment process a little. Then once the release has been created, we can see some of the ways you can use that information to get better visibility across your CI/CD pipeline. Okay, so let's go to Octopus. So I've got a fairly common set of environments here. So I've got development, test, and production. Now, in each of these environments, I've got a single Linux tentacle, which is hosted in Azure for today's webinar. Now, each of these machines will host my PetClinic web application, as shown by the PetClinic web target role here. Now, there's an important point to mention here with your Octopus environments, particularly if you're going to integrate the Octopus Deploy plugin for JIRA Cloud. And that's remembering to set up a mapping between your Octopus environment name and the JIRA environment. Now, you do this by editing the environment. So I'll come into the development one here. You can see here we've got this JIRA environment type. You can also see that it's set to unmapped. So I'm going to set this one to, probably unsurprisingly, the development one. Click save there. But just to show there's not a one-to-one mapping, if you go to the test environment here, which I've named differently to the JIRA environment, you can see that maps to the testing one there. So it's important to do that. So when you're doing deployments, you're telling Octopus to inform JIRA about which JIRA environment it is. So let's go back to that. Now, if you don't set the environment type here, what you see in JIRA is an unknown or undefined environment, but your deployments will still show that. That just shows undefined. So next up, let's take a look at the project process. So we're going to PetClinic, go to process. So what we got here. So currently we've got a couple of steps at the start here to notify our business owners a deployment's about to happen. Now these only run in production, and that's so I don't block developers or testers from getting on with their day jobs. And I've also got an email step here to send the deployment changes. Now this is one of the first ways you can share the details of your deployments to interested stakeholders. And this helps to increase visibility of changes that are being deployed. So we'll come into that and just show you the body of the email. As you can see here, I'm using some Octopus substitution syntax here, which is just going to loop over the deployment changes, get the version, get the release notes, and then also show which work items, in this case, JIRA issues, have been addressed by this deployment. So a neat little way of doing it. Now, the next 3 steps are related to our database, where the database is going to be created and our migration scripts will be run. Step 7 is our deploying PetClinic application to the Wildfly application server. And then number 8 is a Slack notification. And this also includes the release notes, very similarly to the step 3 one where we got our email one. Now, if I just expand that a little bit, I've created this manually in the same way I have with the email body, but this is slightly different to the email one because Slack doesn't like Markdown particularly, and it's got its own formatting. So by doing this, I just get a slightly nicer message that comes in, and we'll see that later. But just in the same way, this includes any JIRA issue links at the top here, and then we've got our release, and then our commits, and any package information as well. Okay, so I'm just going to flip back to Bitbucket Pipeline, see where we are at. Just do a refresh on that. There we go. So we're now at the create release step, and you can see that it's already talking to Octopus as we go. And you can see some nice output that you get here. So it's just finding the packages. So whilst that's creating the release, I'm going to switch back to Octopus, and we'll just go up to the overview. And this allows me to talk about one of the first ways that you can increase visibility across your CI/CD pipeline with Octopus and Atlassian. So here's the release that's just been created. One of the nice things that we've got here is the release notes. So here you can see we've got our deep links for some work items and our descriptions. We've also got our packages and the git commit and the commit message that I created a second ago. Now these deep links are automatically being added to this section using our JIRA issue tracking. This feature allows teams to view the issues and build information that contributed to this release, and that gives end-to-end traceability from issue to deployment. And you can then click these deep links for further information should you need to. So that one's going off to Atlassian, and that one's off to Bitbucket. Now, the other item we have is the deployment notes. So quite handily, we've got our deploy to development go. So if I click in on that, now deployment notes are quite similar to release notes, but what's different about them is they summarize the changes by rolling up release notes from all releases since the previous deployment of the project to the environment, in this case, PetClinic to development. So if you just click on show more here, what you can see is this is release.80, but we've also got release note information about the previous one, which is .79, and that's got the work item of JIRA Pet 12, a different commit here, and then we've got our one that we've just triggered, which is Pet 13. Now this could be particularly useful for things like a production deployment, somewhere where the deployments are less frequent than, say, development or test. And you get to see all of the releases included in one central place for the deployment. That includes multiple issues and commits. Now this information could then be used to share the overall status of the project with either those automatic Slack updates or email notifications I showed you. Now what's cool about these features is they both have templates to allow you to customize the output in the project settings. So we just go have a quick look at that. So here's the release notes template. What I do here is I'm using the, again, Octopus substitution syntax. You can loop over the work items, in this case, the JIRA issues, using the syntax here. And I'm using some Markdown, getting the JIRA issue ID and the link and its description. And then lastly, I loop through each package in the release and add the commit information there as well. Now going down to the deployment changes template. In this one, I'm making use of those rolled up release notes I discussed a moment ago. And you can see that I'm looping through each of the changes, highlighting the release and its version, and then using the release notes that were essentially just rolled up there. And as I said, you can also use Markdown on both of these two to make it look a bit better. Now, one of the other integrations we've got is the Octopus plugin for JIRA Cloud. And with it, you can also see the status of your deployments directly from JIRA. There's our test deployment going now. So if we go into the development one, and we'll click on Pet 13, just that deep link there. And on the right-hand side, we should see releases. You can see the testing ones there as well. So we're clicking in onto that. So here you can see that we've got our deployment to development, and that's got our deep link here to the project, but also the deployment itself. And that was successful. And we've also got our deployment to test that's in progress. You can also see commit information, and that was the commit that we triggered today. So it's not just that, it's deployment, commit, it's the full picture being built up. So we'll close that for a sec. Now I can show you how that is actually working. So we go to the task log. What you can do, at the very bottom, you can actually see that Octopus is communicating with JIRA and it's sending deployment data and all of that status of that information. And that's how it's being displayed into that JIRA issue. Now this is a good example of how Octopus and JIRA integrate nicely to contribute to one of the core DevOps ideas of a continuous feedback loop. Developers, release managers, and stakeholders can all come in and see exactly where features are in the software lifecycle. You can now see that actually test is now deployed successfully. Now this all happens because those two applications are continually talking to each other. Now, before we move on, let's just actually go back to the summary. Just check that the application did deploy okay. So there it is. And then we can search for an owner. Go, edit the owner or add a new pet, etc. That's all good. Okay. So now that deployment's finished, why don't we talk about how the JIRA integration itself is configured within Octopus. So come into configuration, then go to settings, JIRA integration. Now there's two main sections here. The first is for JIRA Cloud deployments we just saw. And if, like me, you're using JIRA Cloud, you can get some additional options here, such as the JIRA Connect app password and the Octopus installation ID. Now, when installing the Octopus plugin for JIRA, you provide the Octopus server URL and the installation ID, and the output of that installation is a JIRA Connect app password that you would then add here. But if you only had JIRA server, which is on premise, change that option, and the ones that are only applicable to cloud go away. But that means that you can still make use of the JIRA issue tracking in the Octopus release and deployment notes that I showed you. I'll just flick that back to cloud, and that allows me to come nicely onto the bottom section, release notes. So you provide it with a username and a password, and also an optional release note prefix. So in this case, I've got release note : Now, if this is specified, what Octopus will do is it will look for a JIRA comment that starts with a given prefix text, release note : and it will use whatever text appears after this prefix as the release note. And that'll be available as the build information as the issue's description. So if no comment is found for whatever reason with that prefix, then Octopus will default back to using the title for that issue. And we can actually see that having happened in our deployment from earlier. So I'll just go back to the project, show the development deployment, and then expand that. So what we can see here for the work item is it's pet 13, and it says performance enhancement that improves page loads across the site. Now if we go back to the JIRA issue, you can see that the title is error displayed on PetClinic website about DB timeout. And then down here, I've got a JIRA comment, release note, performance enhancement that improves the page loads. And that's what's being used as the work item description. So Octopus has taken that text after the release note prefix there, and it's using that as a work item description and not the issue title. So it just allows a way to give you a more customer-friendly release note. So now we've done that, let's go back to the overview and we'll deploy it to production. Now this will require that business owner approval I mentioned previously. So to make this demo go a bit smoother, what I'm going to do, I'm going to add myself to the business, I've already added myself to the business owners team. Now, obviously in real life, you'd want to have separate people to approve the deployments. For now, we'll just say, let's go proceed that. And now that that's started, I also wanted to highlight another item I mentioned earlier, and that's the sharing of your deployment and release notes via a Slack notification. Now, if we head over to Slack, what you'll see down here is that awaiting approval message there that we just had, but above it, you'll see that the deployment to test has finished running, and you get to see all of that information that we saw in those deployment notes. So you've got your work items here, pet 12 and pet 13, the releases, so 79 and 80, and each of those individual commits. So with this, it just provides another medium for you to share that visibility of what changes have been deployed and which work items have been addressed. Okay, so come on to another piece of information we can share. And This is the build information that's associated with any packages in the library. So if we click onto build information, we can click on the PetClinic web application here. And you can see this includes things such as the build environment, in our case, Bitbucket, the build, and that's a link back to the Bitbucket pipeline itself, specifically for that build, the branch, which is the master branch, when it was created, the commits, and you can have multiple here, and again, deep links back to Bitbucket this time, and work items. And in this case, we've got our deep link back to JIRA. So it's bringing that in just another fashion. Now, as I mentioned earlier, we can also see a preview of the JIRA service tester. So if I go back to our project, go to the process, hit add step. And we'll just go, you can see there's a new Atlassian category here. Scroll down. So here's our new JIRA service as change request. So I'm going to hit add. Provide it with a step name. So initiate change request in service desk. Now the only thing that this step requires at this stage is the service ID. So you can add that in there. Now this is configured in JIRA's service desk itself. And what I'll do is hit save, reorder this step so that it's added probably somewhere at the start. Now to start with, this new step will automatically create a JIRA service desk request as part of the deployment. Now the plan for the feature once it's fully complete and released is to automatically check with JIRA Service Desk for any outstanding approvals, and it will pause the deployment. Now, once they eventually get approved and completed within JIRA Service Desk, Octopus will then resume your deployment. So this is going to be a really great addition to Octopus that will provide yet another way to increase visibility across your teams about what is being deployed. And as I mentioned earlier, you can sign up to be notified when this feature is released on octopus.com/roadmap. So last thing to do, we'll just discard that. So now we can see we've got development, test, and production. And we'll just check that production also worked. So I'll come down here, just click on that application. Excellent, that's all looking okay. So let's do a quick recap. So what have we done today? We've looked at a Bitbucket pipeline. We have kicked off a build and then taking a look at some of the integration points in Octopus and JIRA with a deployment to development, test, and production. So that's me ready for a quick drink. So Shawn, whilst I rehydrate, after that, I'll do my best to answer any questions we've got. Shawn, I'll hand over to you.
Thanks, Mark. That was really, really cool. I'm really excited to see that JIRA desk, service desk come to production. We just have just a few questions. The first one is, when we created the release, how was it automatically deployed?
So two things going on here. So in the pipeline itself, we create a release as part of the pipeline step. So that's using the Octo Docker image. And as part of that, it's got this create release command. So that's just a wrapper for the Octopus CLI. So here, the command itself was basically to create the release for that project, in this case, PetClinic, for our Octopus server and our space. And when I created create release, I chose it not to specify a version. So I allowed Octopus to choose its own version. And then the last step in the pipeline is to actually deploy it to development. So once I'd created the release, Octopus created me this version up here, .80. And then I had an additional step here to deploy to development using the deploy-release. Now here, we've got this option here which says version latest. So you could choose to deploy a specific version if you kind of handling the version numbers yourself. I was just letting Octopus handle it all for me. So that's how it was kicked off to deploy to development. So we create the release from within the pipeline itself, and then we deploy to development. But there is some magic going on. So that was to the deploy to development, but not to test. So how did that work? So what we actually have is a lifecycle for PetClinic, which says when you get to the stage where you go to test the test environment next, it'll automatically deploy it for me. So in this phase, it will automatically do it. That's why it's got this little lightning bolt. So it'll automatically be deployed. So essentially, once the deploy to development was successful, test automatically deployed. That's just a feature that I was using primarily for this demo, just to make it all nice and automated. And then for production, you can obviously be aware that we did that manually anyway. Hopefully that answers the question, Shawn.
Yeah, I believe so. We actually had a couple more come in while you were talking. Any plans to add ServiceNow changed ticket integration with Octopus Deploy?
That is something I'm not sure of. I would like to say I'd hope so, but I can't commit to anything, I'm afraid. That's all down to our product and engineering teams.
Fair enough. We have another one. Will JIRA bug linking through Octopus Deploy work with, excuse me, Jenkins build servers instead of Bitbucket pipeline?
Yeah, so assuming that you've got the JIRA integration all set up and you're using JIRA Cloud like we showed here, there's no reason that it wouldn't work. The item that's actually doing the checking for the deployments and the issue notes themselves is Octopus. It's not specifically Jenkins. So as long as you provide the JIRA issue in the commit message, that should be perfectly okay.
Can I post release notes to Confluence?
You know, that is a great question. It wasn't something that I was aware you could actually do. So there's not a way to do it natively in Octopus today, but it's totally possible to create something like a step template to do that for you. Confluence has a REST API, just like many of the Atlassian products, so JIRA does as well. That's how we're actually integrating with JIRA in order to send those the Octopus deployment issues. And I would definitely recommend taking a look at the Confluence REST API. I've seen myself the ability to create a page in Confluence with some content. So there's nothing to stop you from writing a script step to post out to the Confluence REST API, and then using that and using our built-in Octopus release notes in order to do that. Or the deployment notes if you want to get all of the rolled up release notes that I talked about.
Cool. They're still coming in here.
No worries.
The Octopus pipe, is that available now? And if not, when can we expect it?
So the pipe that I was showing you here, let me just go back to the source. We'll go back to the pipeline file itself. So this pipe is experimental, and this only covers one command, and that's pack. And that was really for us to see how the Bitbucket pipes worked. I recently authored a blog post, I think it came out today or yesterday, discussing this particular pipe and how you can create them. It is publicly available, but it is experimental. And what we're planning on doing, as I said, I think in the demo when we were talking about the pipe here, is we're going to look to create a pipe that will just be one pipe. So it will be, let's say, Octopus Deploy / Octo, for argument's sake. I'm not sure on the name. And that will take a variable which will be what action you want to perform. So that might be create release or pack or push or any of those build information. But I can't give you a definitive date, unfortunately, as to when that will be available.
All right. Thanks, Mark. I think that wraps up all the questions.
Okay. Excellent. Well, thanks for those. They were good questions.
Alrighty. As I previously mentioned, we did record this session, so that link will be available in 24 to 48 hours. Along with that email, the links to these resources here that you see on the screen currently. Thanks, Mark, for that presentation. That was really, really, really cool. I just wanted to mention that we have launched an events page at octopus.com/events that will list upcoming webinars. We have 2 of them coming up next month. On May 6th, we have Trust in Octopus, Securing Your CI/CD Pipeline with Leanne Crocker. And on the 20th, we have Octo 101, Getting Started with Java, and that's with Adam Close. So thank you, everybody, for joining us today. Thank you very much, Mark, for that presentation, and have a good day, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.